Today we are discussing about the major steps in scientific method. Scientific method is the systematic procedure and technique used in scientific inquiries and investigations for explaining natural observations. It is technically called empiricism. It holds that reasoning alone is not sufficient in shifting truth, and also that ideas must always be tested through observations and experimentation. In brief, a scientific method involves the collection of data through observation and experimentation and the formulation and testing of hypotheses. This in turn is completed in repeatable steps in order to predict future results. The major steps of scientific method are: first step is careful observation of natural phenomena. Second one, defining or identifying a problem by posing questions about the observation. Third one is collection of additional information to know more about the observed phenomena. Next step is search for answers to the questions by analyzing the problem. Fifth one is verification of the correctness of the answer through tests and further observations. Sixth one is postulation of hypothesis on the basis of findings of the search. Next is testing of acceptability or validity of the hypothesis through experiments. Last one is the generalization of the experimentally proved facts and the formulation of theories. Observation. A scientific study being with the observation of a natural phenomena which arouses the curiosity of the observer. The observation should be correct and repeatable. A scientific observation becomes acceptable only when it is repeated by a number of persons. Observations can be direct using our sense organs or indirect with the help of instruments. Second step is defining of problem. This involves asking questions about the observation. The what, why, and how of the observation have to be subjected to scientific analysis. Therefore, the problem should be defined in such a way that different aspects of the observed phenomena are amenable to the investigation. Consider we observe some species of birds visiting a particular area every year in the same season. After a short period of stay, they disappear to appear again in the same season next year. This observation prompts us to ask questions to ourselves. Where do these birds come from? What brings them over here? What purpose does their visit serve? And so on. Next is the collection of information. Before beginning a scientific investigation, the investigator has to collect and make use of all the available information and data about the problem. This helps to know more about the problem and also to avoid the repetition of work done earlier by someone else. Next is framing a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a supposition, assumption, or provisional explanation which has to be proved or disproved in the light of accepted facts. It provides a logical answer to a question and also helps to predict new facts. Predictions made on the basis of hypotheses have to be further tested by controlled experiments. Let us examine the procedure of making a hypothesis with reference to an example. Think that we have to find out the reason for poor agricultural yield in a particular field. We suspect all possible reasons such as lack of water supply, insufficient availability of light, deficiency of nitrogen in soil, etc. On close observations, it was found that there is sufficient availability of water and light. So we assume that deficiency of soil nitrogen might be the cause of poor yield. Now we generalize this assumption and hold that soil nitrogen is essential for rich crop. This is a hypothesis. Acceptability of this hypothesis has to be varied and established through the scientific testing. Next is testing or experimenting. The correctness, validity, or acceptability of a hypothesis has to be tested with the help of a controlled experiment. Control is an essential part of an ideal experiment. It helps to compare experimental results with non-experimental natural results. This in turn confirms experimental results and establishes the validity of a hypothesis. Quite a number of experimental studies cannot have control. Example studies on planetary movements. This means that some hypotheses are based only on accurate and repeated observations and they do not require testing or verification. Let us visualize a controlled experiment to establish the hypothesis that the time period of a pendulum depends on its length and is independent of the mass suspended. For the experiment, we select a pendulum whose length and the suspended mass can be changed. Find the period of the pendulum for a given length and mass. Repeat the experiment by changing the mass and keeping the length unchanged. We can observe that the time period obtained will be the same. Now change the length of the pendulum for different masses and same length. Find out the time period which would be constant. From the observation, it can be inferred that for a given length, the time period is a constant, and also that by changing the length, the time period also can be changed. From this, we can conclude that the time period of a pendulum is dependent on its length and independent of the mass of suspended. Last one is theorizing. Theory is a scientifically acceptable general principle which seeks to explain a phenomenon. It is formulated on the basis of experimental evidences or on the basis of analysis of interrelated facts. This does not mean that all experiments contribute to theorization. A hypothesis becomes a theory when it is supported by a large body of observations and experimental evidences. A theory becomes a scientific principle or law when it is universally accepted and also when it becomes capable of making true predictions. Thank you.